Hey, what's going on, guys? So I wanted to do a video on the new EOTECH Vudu 1x8 that I got, and also the Scalarworks LEAP 7 mount that I'm going to be putting it on. And I'll get into these things here in a second, but let me just talk for a second about my love for EOTECH and Scalarworks. I mean, I've been using EOTECH probably for as long as I can remember in the military. I mean, they make such amazing optics, and really they kind of set the standard in some ways for optics for your rifles. But you know, it wasn't too long ago that they got into the LPVO game. And so what I have in my hand here is the new Vudu 1x8. This is their newest one that they just came out with this year, in fact, or at the end of last year. The 1x8 power, not the 1x6. They had the 1x6 and I was gonna get it, but I already own a 1x6 LPVO and I didn't want to buy a second one. But when this 1x8 came out, I had to have it, right? So we'll talk about this here in a second. And then Scalarworks, I've been using Scalarworks mounts on my rifles for, I don't know, probably the last 2 years. And I don't think I have a weapon system now that doesn't have a Scalarworks mount on it. And so the Scalarworks mount that I'll be talking about today is their LEAP 7 that they made for, you know, LPVOs specifically. And we'll get into the details of this mount as well. But Scalarworks is one of those companies that doesn't just make mounts, they really innovate in the way they make mounts. It's all the small finite details that have made them who they are and the reputation that they built in the industry. And I just don't see myself going away from Scalarworks mounts, either, whether it's for a pistol red dot, a reflex sight, a shotgun, you know, mount, or in this case, an LPVO mount. All right, so let's kind of get into these, this Vudu 1x8 and the Scalarworks LEAP 7. All right, so as I said before, this is the Vudu 1x8, just came out at the end of this last year. And this is their 8-power version of their 1x6 little brother. And I love this thing, man. It's I haven't been able to shoot this one yet because I just got it not too long ago, but I did shoot the 1x8 at SHOT Show Industry Day, and I immediately fell in love with it. So let's just talk about some of the features that are on this thing. A lot of the features are actually pretty standard for an LPVO, but I'll go over them. So the first thing that you have is an ocular lens, like most LPVOs do, pretty standard. And then on some scopes, or well, I'm talking about this one. So specifically on the Vudu 1x8, you have your reticle focus ring. Now your reticle focus ring is something that you probably won't need until after you've mounted this Vudu onto a weapon and you've already established your eye relief, and then you're just kind of fine tuning the reticle ring. You know, and focusing it to your eyes, whether you have an eye condition or not, or whether you want to kind of fine tune your eye relief. That's what this ring is for. Now going back from there, you have your magnification ring. And so as you notice, this is a 1 to 8 power. And this is a one piece that moves separately. You have that one dot there that's kind of telling you, whoop, right there, that's telling you what magnification it's on. And then what you have here is a throw lever. This throw lever is screw on. So you can screw it on when you want to, you know, use the scope, and you can take it off when you want to store it, or if if it doesn't fit or whatever, you can take that off easily. But this throw lever makes this very easy to throw from one magnification to the next, or from 1 to 8 very quickly, or vice versa. And that's the whole purpose of that throw lever. So moving back one from that, you have the tube itself. Now the tube is a 30mm lens tube, and it's, again, pretty standard for LPVOs, and so that's pretty common. So let's go to the knobs here. Now the knobs you have your elevation knob, you have your windage knob, and then you have your battery housing for your illumination. And as you can see here, that you have your power button on this, and then closest to you, you have the brightness button. And then furthest away from you, you have your dimmer, right? You see that minus right there. So that is your brightness settings and your illumination for that half MOA red dot that's inside of this reticle. These windage and elevation knobs, guys, they are 1/4 MOA adjustable. So that means that one click is 1/4 of MOA incremental as you're making those clicks, which I'll get into a little bit later. But just know that these is, again, pretty standard for an LPVO, but that just tells you that these LPVOs, whether it's 1x6 or 1x8, are pretty precise optics. I mean, there's a lot of high-tech technology that goes into making these, and they want to ensure that these are precise, especially for the amount of money that you're paying for these. All right, and then moving on to the last part of this, you just have your objective lens at the end here. Now let's get into some of the specifications of this scope. I did say this is a 1x8 Vudu, and it is a 1/4 MOA adjustable for windage and elevation, which is pretty amazing. It has a 1/2 MOA dot, and it sits on a second focal plane. And if you think about it, or if you're in the know for these kind of optics, having a 1/2 MOA dot on this reticle inside of a second focal plane is actually pretty impressive in itself. All right, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you can open search or open source or Google that or whatever and figure out what I'm talking about. And then we'll talk about first focal plane versus second focal plane here in a second. But as far as what the 1/4 MOA adjustable reticles mean, or not reticles, excuse me, knobs mean for your windage and elevation, that means that at 100 yards, 1 MOA equals 1 inch. And each click on your windage or elevation equals 1/4 of that 1 MOA, which means 1/4 of an inch. So every time you click one of these knobs, you're moving a 1/4 inch at a time in whatever direction at 100 yards. Now, when you go back to 200 yards, every click doubles. So every click that you make is a half MOA, which means that 4 clicks at 200 yards is roughly 2 inches, or actually it's a little over 2 inches, 2.19 or something. So basically your MOA doubles at 200 yards, and so on and so forth. And you can find the math for that. Pretty standard. If you want to look it up, what that means. So when you're zeroing this thing at 100 yards or 200 yards, whatever you prefer to zero it at, just know that what each click of those mean to your target size and for your zero. All right, so the reticle inside of this Vudu is a pretty popular duplex style pattern reticle. And so what that means is that you have your ballistic holdover points integrated or built in to the reticle. As you can see, there's notch over notch on this one, and it's pretty ideal. Now, if you are a military guy and you're used to mills, this isn't, this is a little kind of a one step down in complexity, but for a newer shooter, this is pretty ideal. Or if you're just a hunter or a 3-gunner or any of the sports kind of categories of shooting, this kind of duplex style reticle pattern is ideal for you. Whereas mills gets really finite and really into the details, and even I don't even know all of that and what that means for ballistic holdovers. But for this style reticle, ballistic holdovers is pretty easy. So like I said earlier, the Vudu 1x8 is a second focal plane optic. But before we get into that, let's talk about the difference between a first focal plane and a second focal plane optic. So first focal plane, all that means is that the reticle is sitting in front of the magnification lens. So that means that when you're cranking down on that magnification, going to 2 to 3 to 4, 6 or 8, the reticle is also getting bigger, right? As your sight picture gets bigger, your reticle gets bigger, right? And so the pro of a first focal plane optic is that the reticle is getting as big as your magnification on your zoom, right? If you're at 8 power, the reticle is going to be at a 8 power ratio, which means that your ballistic holdover ratio to your target size or your sight picture is 1:1. It matches. You don't have to sit there and guess, why on a smaller reticle and a huge target what your ballistic holdover is. That 1:1 is pretty ideal, and for a newer shooter, that is probably pretty ideal as well. So you don't have to sit there and do the guessing game or kind of get into ballistic data. Now, the con of a first focal plane optic is that as you're cranking down, or cranking up, I should say, on your magnification to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 8 or whatever, your lens or your sight picture, the clarity starts to distort a little bit. There's a little bit of degrading in the quality of the sight picture. You get a little bit of distortion because your reticle is also magnifying with your sight picture. And that's really the only con there. And some people don't mind it. Some people hate it. I mean, I personally don't like it, but you know, it's shooter preference. So getting into second focal plane, which is what this Vudu 1x8 is. On a second focal plane, it means that your reticle is sitting behind the magnification lens. So as you're cranking up on your magnification to 6 or 8, your reticle stays the same size. Now the pros of that are that your sight picture and your clarity of glass stay the same all the way up to 6 or all the way up to 8, and it doesn't distort, it doesn't degrade, and you have a crystal clear picture regardless of what magnification you're at. The con is that you lose that 1-to-1 ratio for ballistic holdover on your reticle to the target size or your sight picture. So as you're cranking up to 6, 7, 8, your reticle is at a 1, and so now you kind of have to guess what your ballistic holdover point means on a one kind of sight picture for that to a 8 power sight picture for your actual target or whatever you're shooting at. And it's not hard. It's not super hard to figure out. It's really just a little bit of math. But if you're less experienced in the LPVO optic or just precision gun, it's a little bit. It can be stressful and a little bit frustrating. So those are the two differences between first focal plane and second focal plane. The Vudu 1x8 is a second focal plane, which I prefer. And really, what all that means is that it makes LPVOs a very ideal optic for you guys that want to get something that is variable in zoom. Now, the only way to really kind of figure out which one is right for you is just to get behind a gun and get behind these optics and shoot them and, you know, play with them and figure out which one you like and which one you don't like. And that's really the only way to kind of choose which one is the right one for you. Otherwise, again, it's shooter preference. Some people like first, some people like second. I prefer second. Now let's get into this Scalarworks LEAP 7, right? Now, what I really like about this LEAP 7 is there's a couple things that are integrated into this mount that really make it special, and I'll get into it here in a second. But you know, like I said earlier, Scalarworks is just one of those companies that they don't just make mounts, they innovate with their mounts. And that's what really makes them special. And it's like the little details that really kind of make this LEAP 7, to me, probably the best kind of LPVO or 30 millimeter lens, 30 millimeter tube scope mount on the market. I mean, I just love this thing, and I'll kind of get into why. Okay, so on most traditional scope mounts, you kind of have that two-piece pancake style mounting, right? So you kind of have that lower portion of the ring. You set your scope on there, and then you set your two top pieces on there, and then each one has a screw, and you have to sit there and you have to screw each one individually. And if you don't have a torque wrench, you have to kind of figure out which one is, you know, needs more tightening or whatever. But even with a torque wrench, you may have a little bit of error in the way they sit. Now they're supposed to be flat and they're supposed to sit flush, but you know, as you're cranking down on this tube, they start to kind of move on you. One starts to cant on one side and the other one has a little bit of space on the other side. And you're just trying to figure out why you don't have a flush installation of that top pieces on top of your tube, on top of your optic. Well, what Scalarworks did was they went away from that and they actually created a hinge style clamp, right? And as you can see, it hinges here and it clamps down at the bottom. Now, what's really great about that is that it creates a perfect ring. So when I put this scope in here and I set it in there, it creates a perfect housing around that scope. There is no deviation. There is no top piece, bottom piece. And what's really special about this is, if I can get this to focus in, is the overlap between this little piece and the ramp that it goes into. See how that's cut out? That's what I really love right there, because that little channel and that overlap really allows for a snug fit of your scope. And then also, you know the way this sits right here. If I can get this to focus back in, see how flush that is right here? You know that you have a perfect install of your scope when that's sitting flush. And it's sitting flush because of that channel and that overlap between the two pieces. I mean, I love that. Little details like that is what really kind of wins me over for Scalarworks. And then going to their click drive wheels here. Their click drive technology was specifically made so that you don't need tools to install this mount onto the rail of your rifle. You don't need a Gerber or, you know, pliers to crank down on this thing. This click ensures that every time I hear it, it's that much more tighter, and it's made to be hand tightened. So as I crank down on this thing with my finger and it doesn't go anymore, I know that this thing is not going to back out, because that click in that wheel means that it's locked into place. It's not going to back out on me. It's not going to loosen on me over time. That click drive technology is pretty superior to, you know, traditional kind of, you know, other wheels or whatever that you're using to install it onto the Picatinny rail or your accessory rail. The cherry on top for this thing, guys, is this red screw right here. All right, let me get that to focus really quick. This red screw is called their level drive screw, and it does exactly what its name says. It levels out your scope. Now, if most of you guys have ever installed a scope onto a mount, you know that eventually you're gonna have to level your scope somehow, whether you're using a deck of cards or you're using a actual bubble leveler or whatever other means you know, you use to level a scope. This one screw kind of just, you know, is the solution for all of that. No more deck of cards, no more anything. Once you install your scope onto here, you're going to go to the bottom and start cranking up on that screw, and that screw is going to come up and touch the bottom of that scope nice and flush, and it's going to straighten out your scope for you. So now you don't need to do anything else to level your scope. Your scope is leveled by that one level drive screw. No need to go to the range and hang a string with a plumb bob and sit there and get behind a reticle and try to straighten your scope and, you know, match the string with your reticle. Nope, this level drive screw takes care of that. So that's why these little features on this LEAP 7 just make it such a superior mount for your optic. I mean, I love this thing, guys. I just don't see any reason to go away from this or use anything better, because I don't think there is anything better out there on the market. I'm pretty sure that this is pretty much the best kind of LPVO 30mm tube mount on the market. I know I've already said that a couple times, but I have a smile on my face because I love this thing so much. So let's get into the installation. All right, so when I'm mounting my scope onto the ring, guys, or onto the mount here, I personally like to push my scope all the way to the front. Now, that means that I have more eye relief back here, right? So if my eye is right here, and I have it, if my eye is right here, and I mount this to the front, then I am allowing for less eye relief. But if I mount it to the rear, I'm allowing for more eye relief. And so this is how I like my setup. I like to push the scope as far forward as I can on the mount. And then that gives me the most eye relief. Now, where I install it on the Picatinny rail is also kind of, you know, balancing that out a little bit. But this is how I like to set it up. Also, I just like that it sits middle on the scope itself, and I think that's also a factor for me. But let's just talk about the fit of this mount on here really quick. This is a very snug fit, guys, and I can't kind of show you on video, but again, remember when I was talking about how that needs to sit flush? You see how flush that is? Now, it's not completely flush here because I haven't put the screws in, but that is pretty snug. Like, that is not falling out or moving on me at all, and I haven't even put the screws in yet. But that's what I love about this scope. Again, very fine-tuned machinery here, or machining, I should say. All right, so once I have that on there, I'm not even worried about leveling the scope yet, because again, I have that level drive. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the screws in here, and we're gonna start screwing this in. All right, so I have all 4 of my screws mounted, and you can see that that level drive screw is kind of off of that scope a little bit. So now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna start pushing that up towards the scope. And I don't know if this is level right now or not, but as you guys can see probably, as I screw this a little bit more, the scope starts to level out. I can feel it in my hand. So then I'm gonna give that, I'm gonna make that pretty tight, but not like, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that tube. You know, I don't want to bend that tube or possibly do internal damage on that tube. So I'm making it pretty snug, but not crazy tight. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come and apply the final torque on my screws, on my star screws. So apply that final torque. And then I'm gonna come back to my my level drive screw, and I'm going to just barely rest it on that scope. Just so they're touching. That way there's no room for error on that scope to move. You know, if it gets banged up, or if I bump it against something, or if I just, you know, store it, there's just no room for that scope to move whatsoever. Not besides the, you know, not just from the screw, the 4 star screws that are holding this thing in place, but also from that, you know, that level screw. So it's barely touching right now, and that's just how I want it. And so there you go. It's nice and installed. I'll show you that this side. See how it sits nice and flush. No deviation. And right now this thing is leveled. I don't have to do anything else. Like this is ready to go. I just got to throw it on a rifle and it is ready to zero. All right. I mean, guys, this is an awesome combination. I just love that I have this. I can't even tell you guys how happy I am to have this with Vudu 1x8 with this LEAP 7 from Scalarworks. It's just a perfect combo in my opinion, and I can't wait to get this on a rifle and zero it. And you know, we'll do that zero video for you guys as well. All right, guys, so that is all I got for this video. I hope that it was educational. I hope that it helped you out, whether you're new to this or experienced. You know, that's always the goal of my videos, is to educate you guys as much as I can. Now, I'm no expert in precision or long gun. That's why I hired, you know, my instructor, Travis Vacinda, to come in and school me up, but also teach you guys courses. And so stay tuned for that. But you know, I know I have some knowledge of this stuff, and you know, I'm not as passionate about long gun, but you know, I like to get more and more into it, and especially if I'm going to invest the money into this, then I need to invest into the training and learning experience about it as well. And I can't wait for that. But for the most part, you know, I hope you guys, you know, enjoyed this video. Definitely go check out EOTECH, check out the Vudu 1x8, the 1x6, go to Scalarworks, give each one of these companies a follow, check out their LEAP mounts, not just this LEAP 7, but all their other LEAP for you know, your red dots and stuff like that, and their shotgun one. And hopefully you guys get to see EOTECH products, you know, not just the EOTECH products, but the Vudu and specifically on the Musa store here soon, as well as Scalarworks mounts. And if not, you can just go to them and support them, because I'm telling you guys, this is really nice equipment that each one of these companies has made. All right, so that's all I got. Again, message me if you have any questions, leave something in the comments or whatever. And you know, you guys know how to reach out to me if you're on Instagram. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Cheers.